Mary sat in her cozy kitchen, the morning sunlight filtering through thin white curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. Outside, autumn leaves danced in the wind, and the faint hum of distant cars reminded her that life moved on, even when her own days felt still. It had been quiet since her husband left years ago, but today, the silence felt different, warmer somehow because her son, Ethan, was home. He had arrived the night before, tired from his long drive from Boston. 32 years old now, Ethan had built a busy life for himself. Yet no matter how far he went or how long he stayed away, coming home seemed to stir something in both of them, a mixture of love, nostalgia, and a quiet sadness neither dared to mention. Mary watched him from across the table as he poured himself a cup of coffee. He looked older than she remembered, his jaw sharper, his expression thoughtful, his shoulders carrying a kind of invisible weight. There was something about him today that made her pause. His movements were slower, his gaze deeper, as if he was carrying something inside that he wasn't ready to say. "You've been working too hard again," she said, trying to sound light. He smiled faintly but didn't deny it. "You know me, I can't seem to stop." Mary chuckled softly, stirring her tea. "You're just like your father used to be." At the mention of his father, Ethan looked up. There was a flicker in his eyes, something unspoken, a feeling caught between pain and acceptance. "I've been thinking about him lately," he said. Mary's hand paused midair, spoon tapping gently against the cup. "Oh," Ethan leaned back in his chair, looking toward the window. "Not in a bad way, just ... wondering if he ever thought about us after he left." The question hung in the air. It wasn't the first time the subject came up, but something about the way he said it made her heart twist. "I used to wonder that too," she admitted quietly, "but then I stopped trying to understand it. Sometimes people leave not because they stop caring, but because they don't know how to stay." He nodded, a distant look in his eyes. "Maybe you're right." The clock ticked softly on the wall. Mary could feel the weight in his words, but she didn't press further. She knew him well. He needed space to find his thoughts. Still, she couldn't help but notice how he kept glancing at her, as though searching for something in her face, something he couldn't name. After a while, she said gently, "You've changed. Ethan, you seem ... quieter." He gave a small laugh. "Guess life does that to people." Then, after a pause, he added, "But I think I'm also starting to realize things I didn't before." "What kind of things?" she asked. He hesitated, running his fingers around the edge of his coffee mug. "Just how much time passes without us noticing. How easy it is to lose track of what really matters. I don't want to keep doing that." Mary smiled softly. "You're still young. You have time to make things right." He looked at her, then really looked. His eyes held a quiet intensity, the kind that made her chest tighten. There was warmth, sadness, and something else she couldn't quite name. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt heavy, yet tender, as if both understood something unspoken. "Mom," he said finally, his voice low but steady, "can I ask you something? It's personal." She met his gaze, her curiosity growing. "Of course." He hesitated, clearly trying to find the right words. "Do you ever regret it? The way things turned out after Dad left?" The question came softly, but it struck deep. Mary wasn't expecting it. Her breath caught as old memories came rushing back. The nights she cried quietly so Ethan wouldn't hear. The mornings she forced herself to smile, pretending everything was fine. After a long moment, she said, "Yes, I used to regret it. I used to think about all the things that could have been different. But then I realized dread doesn't change anything. It only keeps you stuck in the past. So I chose to be thankful for what I still had." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "And what was that?" "You," she said simply. "Having you gave me a reason to move forward." A faint smile touched his lips, but his eyes softened with emotion. "You've always been stronger than I thought, Mom." She smiled back, though her throat felt tight. "I had to be. You needed me to be." The room grew quiet again. the sound of rain beginning to tap gently against the windows. The air felt calm, yet filled with something powerful: love, memory, and an unspoken ache. Mary realized this wasn't just a casual talk. Something deeper was shifting in Ethan. He wasn't just visiting to rest or catch up. He was searching for meaning, for connection, for something he hadn't yet said. When he looked at her again, there was something in his gaze that unsettled her slightly, not in a bad way, but in a way that made her heart race. It was softer, deeper, almost emotional. He seemed older, wiser, but also lost in thought, as though standing at a crossroads in his life. She reached across the table, resting her hand lightly on his. "Whatever it is you're thinking, you can tell me." He smiled, though his eyes were filled with emotion. "I will. Just not yet. I need to find the right way to say it." Mary didn't push. She only nodded. "Take your time, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in years, she saw a tear shimmer in his eyes before he quickly looked away. That tiny glimpse told her more than words ever could. He was holding something inside, something meaningful, something personal, but she trusted he would share it when he was ready. The rest of the day passed in soft conversation. They cooked lunch together, talked about his work, and laughed about old memories. Yet, through it all, Mary felt a current running quietly beneath the surface. A feeling that something important was coming. That night, as she lay in bed, she replayed their talk in her mind. The way he looked at her, the way his voice trembled when he spoke about the past, it all felt different. There was tenderness in his tone, but also sorrow, as though he carried a truth he was afraid to reveal. She turned off the light and closed her eyes. But sleep didn't come easily. For the first time in years, her heart was restless. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but deep down, she felt that whatever Ethan was holding back would change everything between them forever. And just before she drifted off, she whispered into the quiet room, "Whatever it is, my dear boy, I'll understand." Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and calm, marking the beginning of something neither of them could yet name. The next morning began quietly. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, painting golden lines across the table where Mary sat with her cup of coffee. She had barely slept. Her mind kept circling back to Ethan, his tone, his look, the hesitation in his words. Something inside her told her that he wasn't just visiting for rest or nostalgia. There was a reason behind this trip, something deeper that he hadn't said yet. When Ethan came downstairs, he looked fresher, but his face carried the same thoughtful look. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning, sweetheart," Mary replied, smiling gently. "You slept okay?" "Yeah," he said, pouring himself coffee. "You know, it's strange, being back here after so long. The house feels smaller, but warmer somehow." Mary chuckled lightly. "That's what happens when you've been gone too long. Everything changes except the memories." He sat down across from her, stirring his drink slowly. For a moment, they sat in silence, both lost in thought. Then, without looking up, Ethan said, "Mom, I've been thinking about moving back. Maybe for good." Mary froze, her hand tightening around the cup. "What?" He finally met her eyes. "I know it's sudden, but I'm tired of city life. The noise, the rush, it doesn't feel like me anymore. I miss this. I miss being close to you." Her heart swelled and ached all at once. She dreamed of hearing those words, but now that he'd said them, she didn't know how to react. "Ethan, that's a big change," she said slowly. "Your job, your friends, your life, they're all there." He nodded. "I know, but I've been thinking about what really matters. And honestly, I think I've been chasing the wrong things." She could hear the sincerity in his voice. There was something raw and honest about it. Something that came not from impulse, but reflection. "What made you decide this?" she asked. He looked down, his voice quiet. "I guess I realized how fast time is passing. Every year I promise myself I'll come visit more. And every year I don't. I don't want to wake up one day and regret not spending more time with you." Mary felt tears sting her eyes. She quickly blinked them away. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "You don't owe me anything. You've built a good life for yourself." "I know," he said, holding her hand tighter. "But I want to build something new, something that feels real." There was a pause, not awkward, but heavy with emotion. The kind that comes when two people silently understand each other. "Would you be okay with me staying for a while?" he asked. Mary smiled, though her throat tightened. "Of course I would. This house has always been yours." Ethan's shoulders relaxed and a small smile curved his lips. "Thanks, Mom." Mom, the rest of the morning passed gently. They went through old boxes in the attic, sorting through photo albums and forgotten souvenirs. Each item carried a story, laughter, memories. Pieces of time stitched together by love. Mary found an old photo of Ethan at 10 years old, grinning with a missing front tooth, holding his father's fishing rod. "You were so proud that day," she said, smiling through a wave of nostalgia. Ethan looked at the picture and exhaled softly. "Yeah, Dad promised we'd go back the next weekend, but we never did." Her smile faded slightly. "He wasn't good at keeping promises." Ethan nodded. "I think that's why I've been so scared to make them." That sentence struck her deeply. She realized how much his father's absence had shaped him, his carefulness, his tendency to hold back emotions, his fear of failing those he loved. She wanted to say something comforting, but before she could, he looked up and smiled faintly. But maybe it's not too late to change that. That afternoon, they went for a walk around the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, lined with maple trees glowing in orange and red. Every few houses, neighbors waved, surprised but happy to see Ethan back. As they walked, Ethan said, "I didn't tell you everything last night." Mary glanced at him. "I've figured as much." "You had that look." He laughed softly. "What look?" "The one you used to have when you were little and wanted to say something but didn't know how." He smiled, shaking his head. "You still know me too well." "So?" she asked gently. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I've been offered a new job. A remote position. I can work from anywhere." Her eyes widened. "Really?" he nodded. "Yeah. That's why I thought maybe I could stay here longer. Help around the house. Maybe fix that porch you always talk about." Mary stopped walking and looked at him, her heart swelling with pride and tenderness. "Ethan, you don't know how happy that makes me." He smiled warmly. "Then I guess it's settled." For a moment, they stood there, surrounded by falling leaves and the faint chill of autumn air. There was peace, the kind that comes when life starts to make sense again. Later that evening, they cooked dinner together. The kitchen filled with the aroma of roasted vegetables and herbs, laughter echoing softly against the walls. It had been years since the house felt so alive. As they sat at the table, Ethan looked at his mother with quiet affection. He said, "I forgot how good your cooking is." She chuckled. "You say that every time you visit." "Because it's true," he said sincerely. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, till Ethan's expression changed, thoughtful again. "Mom," he began, "when I said I wanted to stay longer, there's another reason too." Her fork paused midair. "Oh," he hesitated, eyes lowering to his plate. "I think I've been lost for a while. I keep chasing goals that don't make me happy. I want to find purpose again, something that feels right." Mary listened carefully, her heart aching with both worry and love. "You will," she said gently. "Sometimes all it takes is coming home." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what I've needed all along." The sincerity in his voice filled the room like a soft melody. The bond between them, once stretched thin by time and distance, felt renewed, warm, strong, unbreakable as the night went on. They shared stories, laughter, and small moments that stitched the years apart back together. When the clock struck 10, Mary looked at Ethan and said quietly, "I'm glad you came home." He smiled, meeting her gaze. "Me too." But in his eyes, she saw something else, a quiet storm of emotions, something deeper still, unspoken. She sensed it, but didn't ask. Not yet. She knew that whatever he was holding back, it was building toward something important. something that would soon change both their lives in a way neither expected. And as she blew out the candle on the table, the faint glow fading into darkness, she whispered a silent thought. Maybe coming home isn't the end of something. Maybe it's the beginning. Outside, the wind rustled softly through the trees, carrying with it the promise of the days ahead. The following morning, the sky was gray and heavy with clouds, the kind that hinted at rain but held back just enough to make the air still. Mary stood by the window, watching the quiet neighborhood. Her thoughts drifted to Ethan, how he had come back different, softer in some ways, but heavier too, as if life had carved deeper lines into his heart. Something about the way he looked at her last night still lingered in her mind. It wasn't sadness, not exactly, but something close, like a man standing on the edge of a truth he wasn't ready to say. Ethan walked into the kitchen, dressed casually, hair a little messy, holding his phone loosely in his hand. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Mary replied with a gentle smile. "Coffee's ready." He poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. "I talked to my boss this morning," he said suddenly. "Oh?" she asked, trying to read his tone. "I told him I'm taking a break. A long one." Mary turned to him, surprised but calm. "And how did he take that?" Ethan shrugged lightly. "Better than I expected. He said I've earned it." "That's good," she said softly. "Maybe this is what you need." A pause. "Yeah," he agreed, but his eyes looked distant. A pause. "Maybe even a restart." The rain finally began to fall, soft drops tapping against the window. The sound filled the silence between them, comforting and slow. Later that day, Ethan decided to fix the old porch railing that had been loose for years. Mary offered to help, but he insisted she rest. From the kitchen window, she watched him work, steady, focused, like he was trying to rebuild more than wood. It made her heart ache with pride and something deeper, something that words couldn't quite describe. When he finally came inside, his hands were dusty and his smile was real. "You know," he said, "doing something simple like that feels good. It's like I've been missing this kind of peace." Mary laughed quietly. Peace usually hides in small things. You just have to look long enough to see it. He nodded, looking at her for a long moment before saying, "You always know the right thing to say." That night, they had dinner by candlelight, not for any occasion, but because the power flickered out during the rain. The soft glow made the kitchen look almost magical. Mary poured them both tea, and for a while, they simply listened to the rain. Ethan finally broke the silence. "Mom, can I tell you something? Something I've never said out loud." Mary looked at him gently. "Of course." He hesitated, then exhaled. "I'm scared. Scared that I've wasted too much time chasing things that don't matter. Scared that I've become someone I don't even recognize." Her heart tightened. "Ethan, everyone feels that way at some point. Life doesn't come with a map. You find your way one wrong turn at a time." He looked at her, eyes soft with emotion. "You make it sound simple, 'cause it is," she said quietly. "You're still here, still breathing, still trying. That's all that matters. It's for a long time." He just looked at her, really looked, as if seeing her not just as his mother, but as a person who'd lived through her own storms. He realized how much strength she carried in silence. The next day brought sunlight again. Mary was in the garden trimming roses when Ethan came outside with a small box. "Found this in my old room," he said, handing it to her. She opened it and gasped softly. Inside were old letters, ones she had written to him when he was in college. "You kept these?" He nodded. "Every single one." Mary smiled, touched. "You never said that," he shrugged. "Didn't think I needed to. They reminded me of home when everything else felt uncertain." She looked at him warmly. "You've always had a kind heart, Ethan, even when you doubted yourself." He smiled faintly, his voice low. "I think I lost that part of me for a while." "Then maybe this is where you find it again," she said softly. The afternoon passed peacefully. They cooked together, laughed about old stories, and even watched one of their favorite movies from when he was little. The years between them seemed to fade, replaced by a simple closeness that neither had realized they missed so much. But that night, when Ethan sat alone on the porch, the air cool and quiet, his thoughts grew heavier again. He thought about the years gone, the missed birthdays, the calls he didn't return, the moments he thought he had more time for. When Mary came outside with a blanket and draped it over his shoulders, he smiled faintly. "You always know when I'm thinking too much?" "I'm your mother," she said, sitting beside him. "I can hear your thoughts without a word." He chuckled softly, then turned serious. "I don't know if I ever told you how much you mean to me. I think I've taken you for granted." Her eyes glistened in the dim porch light. "You don't need to say that, Ethan. I know you love me." "I do," he said firmly. "More than I ever said." They sat in silence, watching the stars peek through scattered clouds. It was a quiet kind of healing, one that came from understanding rather than words. Days turned into a week. And slowly, the house filled with laughter again. Ethan began helping neighbors, fixing fences, mowing lawns, doing small things that brought him joy. He looked lighter, as if the weight he carried for years was finally easing. One evening, while setting the table, Mary noticed him standing by the window, lost in thought. "Something on your mind?" she asked. He turned to her with a small smile. "Yeah, I've been thinking of starting something here. Maybe open a small workshop. Woodwork, repairs, something simple but real." Her face lit up. "That sounds perfect for you. You think so?" "I know so," she said, her voice warm. "You've always been happiest when your hands are busy and your heart is calm." He nodded slowly, a quiet determination in his eyes. "Then maybe it's time to stop running from what feels right." That night, after dinner, Mary found herself reflecting too. Watching Ethan rebuild himself piece by piece filled her with hope and gratitude. For years, she had prayed that he would come home not just to visit, but to find himself again. Now, she was watching it happen. As the clock ticked softly, Ethan looked at her and said, "You know, Mom, when I first came here, I thought I was lost. But maybe I just needed to look into your eyes again to remember who I was." Her heart swelled with emotion. She reached out and touched his cheek. "And I knew something was different the moment you did," she whispered. He smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "Different. Yeah, but in a good way." The air between them was filled with quiet love, the kind that doesn't need grand gestures or perfect words. Just the unspoken truth that sometimes coming home is not just about a place. It's about rediscovering the people who remind you of your heart. And as they sat together under the soft hum of the night, the world outside faded, leaving only the glow of connection that time could never dim. The next morning came with sunlight pouring through the curtains, warm and golden. Mary stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She could hear the sound of birds outside mixed with the faint hum of a car passing down the quiet street. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel lonely. It felt alive again. Ethan walked in, still in his old flannel shirt, hair tousled, a calmness in his face she hadn't seen in a long time. He smiled. "Morning smells like peace," he said, taking the cup she offered. Mary laughed softly. "That's because peace finally found you." He sat down at the table where they'd shared so many serious talks over the past days. But today, something was lighter between them. "I talked to a friend yesterday," Ethan said. "He knows someone who's selling a small workshop out by the edge of town. It's old, but it's got potential." Mary looked up, her eyes bright with curiosity. "You're really thinking of doing it?" "I'm done thinking," he said. "I want to build something that feels real. Something that makes sense." She smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "You've always been good with your hands. You can turn anything broken into something beautiful." He gave her a small grin. "Guess that runs in the family." The day unfolded quietly. Ethan spent hours sketching ideas for his workshop while Mary tended her garden. She watched him through the window now and then, his head bent over his notes, a faint smile on his face. There was a quiet joy in seeing her son rediscover purpose. Every time she looked at him, she saw glimpses of the boy who used to run through the yard with scraped knees and wild dreams. In the evening, Ethan walked to the garden, hands in his pockets. "You ever think," he asked, "how time just disappears? Like one day you blink and 20 years are gone." Mary nodded. "That's how life works. But it's never too late to make what's left count." He smiled softly. "That's what I'm trying to do now. I think I finally understand what you meant about slowing down." They stood there for a while, the golden sunset casting a soft glow over them. It felt like a moment suspended in time, quiet, peaceful, and full of unspoken gratitude. As night fell, they made dinner together. Mary cut vegetables while Ethan stirred the soup, teasing her about her old-fashioned way of cooking. Laughter filled the kitchen, light and free. The air no longer carried the heaviness it once did. It felt like they had rebuilt something invisible between them, a bond stronger than before. After dinner, Ethan disappeared into the living room. When he came back, he held a small wrapped box. "I was saving this," he said, handing it to her. Mary looked surprised. "What's this for?" "Just open it." Inside was a simple silver bracelet, engraved with the words, "You were my first home." For a moment, Mary couldn't speak. Her throat tightened and her eyes filled with tears. She looked up at him, touched beyond words. "Ethan, this is beautiful." He smiled shyly. "It's not fancy, but it's true. Wherever I went, no matter how far, you were always home to me." Mary reached out, holding his hand. "That's the most beautiful thing you've ever said to me." They sat quietly after that, the glow from the lamp soft on their faces. There was nothing left to explain, no apologies needed. Just a shared understanding, love, forgiveness, and the realization that time hadn't taken everything away. It had simply reshaped what mattered most. Later that week, Ethan drove out to see the old workshop. Mary came along, her curiosity piqued. The building was small, weathered, with sunlight streaming through cracks in the roof. But Ethan saw potential everywhere. "It's perfect," he said, running his hand over the wooden frame. Mary smiled. "Most people would see a mess." "Yeah," Ethan said, eyes gleaming. "But you taught me to see what something can become, not what it is." They spent the afternoon cleaning, laughing, and planning. The smell of dust mixed with the crisp air. Every corner seemed to whisper of new beginnings. When they finally stepped outside, tired but smiling, Ethan said, "You know, I think this place is going to change everything." Mary looked at him proudly. "It already has." Weeks passed and the workshop began to take shape. Ethan worked every day, painting walls, fixing tools, and setting up benches. Neighbors stopped by, curious, and soon he started helping them with repairs. Word spread fast. "The man with the golden hands," they called him. Mary often visited, bringing lunch and sitting in the corner while he worked. She loved watching him come alive again. One afternoon, she brought an old photograph of Ethan as a child holding a toy plane they built together. She placed it on a shelf. "For luck," she said. He smiled. "For love," he corrected. As months went by, the bond between them grew deeper, built not on dependence but understanding. They talked openly about mistakes, regrets, and dreams still left to chase. Ethan often said coming home was the best decision I ever made. Mary would smile, her heart warm. Sometimes the universe gives you a second chance disguised as an ending. One cool autumn evening, after closing the shop, Ethan walked his mother home. The streets were quiet, the air filled with the scent of leaves. "You know," he said, "I used to think success meant running faster, climbing higher. But now I realize it's just about feeling at peace with yourself." Mary nodded, slipping her arm through his. "Peace isn't something you chase. It's something you create." He looked at her, eyes gentle. "You've been right about everything, Mom." She laughed softly. "That's because I've had more time to learn from life." They reached the house, and Mary paused at the door, looking up at the stars. "Your father would be proud of you," she said quietly. Ethan's voice softened. "I hope so. I know so," she replied, touching his shoulder. "Because I am." Inside, the house glowed with the warmth of lamps and memories. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, the same one where their story had quietly begun again, and looked at his mother, smiling as she poured tea. "Funny," he said, "how the smallest moments become the biggest chapters." Mary nodded. "That's how love works. Quiet, patient, and always waiting for you to see it." They shared tea in silence, both knowing that life had given them something rare. Not perfection, but peace. And as the night settled around them, Mary looked into her son's eyes once more. This time there was no worry, no distance, only light. She smiled, realizing the truth she had always known deep inside. Sometimes love doesn't ask for grand gestures. It just asks for you to be there fully, honestly, and finally home.